go. I see one of our speakers. And all right, well, it looks like we're just a shade after 7 o'clock, so let's get started. Welcome to Nature Guelph. Again, we've muted everyone upon arrival. I'm sorry if I'm not responsive to the chat, but I will keep an eye on it. So if anything urgent comes up, please do let us know, but otherwise we'll address comments at the end of each segment. My name is Val Wyatt. I'm the host of your Bird Wing tonight, and I'm also regional coordinator for the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas for Wellington Region. I'd especially like to acknowledge at this time, though, Dean and Patty, who are taking the lead organizing the speakers for these meetings and making them run smoothly. So you'll hear from Dean in a bit, at least for sure. So at tonight's meeting, we're going to follow what will probably be our usual format. We'll start with a few announcements and reports, and then we'll go on to a breeding bird atlas tips and ticks, and that's very intentional. We're thinking it'll be instructional sessions on surveys, bird identification, and the like, followed by a guest speaker on a bird topic, of course. So for tonight's presentation, we're especially fortunate to have Mike Cadman speaking for the Atlas portion. Mike Cadman is the coordinator of the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas, and he'll be reviewing some very current Atlas resources and answering your questions. And then we'll have guest speaker Neil Trotter of Vortex Canada to show and tell us all we need to know about birding optics. Now, as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral lands of several First Nations. We recognize the significance of the Dish with One Spoon covenant on this land and offer our respect to our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit neighbors as we strive to strengthen our relationships with them. I just realized I need to start recording our session. Perhaps I will wait until we start.
Recording already. Wow.
We are recording. Okay. Thank you, Dean. I had forgotten. I had asked Dean to remind me. Good. All right. I'd also like to, if you're unfamiliar with Nature Guelph, although I imagine many of you are, the Bird Wing operates under the umbrella of Nature Guelph, whose mandate is to connect people with nature and inspire them to celebrate it and protect it. And as an entirely volunteer-run registered charities, we really value your membership. The membership fees go directly to a lot of very useful things, and each individual member adds to a collective voice for nature. So please do consider joining us either by online or by mail. It's a good bargain for the 2021 membership year. I'd like to quickly highlight some upcoming events with the club. Our club meeting is Thursday, April 8th. I'm particularly looking forward to this one, the Highgate Mastodon story. Peter Russell from the University of Waterloo will be speaking about some fossils that turned up quite nearby. And in 1 month, our next Birdwing meeting, we have tentative, as well as speaking about our little Atlas session, we have tentatively booked Brendan Samuels from Western University, who's a PhD student studying window collisions and bird fatality. So what bird vision and behavior can teach us about window collisions. This is the first of a new session called the Wellington Notable Bird Report, and I will pass it over to Dean Post.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, this is a brand new segment to Guelph Birdwing. We thought we'd bring something new that allows all our members an opportunity to participate. So we're going to start this month and show you the Wellington Notable Bird Report, not Rare Bird Report, Notable Bird Report. And we really want to make this your report. Val, next slide, please. So the concept, every month, we want to share sightings from the previous months, and we want them to come from you, the members. So we want ones that you're proud of. It could be a lifer, it could be a first year, it could be one that you were shocked to see, or one you thought you saw. We all had those. You determine the reason. But we do ask, send a photo. Doesn't have to be a good photo. Could even be a sketch of a bird you thought you saw. It doesn't matter. Submit them to birdwing@natureguelph.ca. And if you don't mind, put in the subject line notable bird. That way we can sort them and find them easily. So we really want you to participate. So this month, we're going to show you a list of some birds, but I'm hoping that next month, we're really just going to show off you folks. So Val, if you don't mind, the next slide, please. So this data, thanks very much to Dan McNeil, who did a lot of great work. Him and I were back and forth. He figured out how to way to get all the data out of Ebird. If you don't know who Dan is the local reviewer for Ebird and a great resource. Anyhow, he's able to pull a list of all the rare birds as determined by Ebird. And here's the list. So you can see in the past month, here in Wellington, we saw some fantastic birds that were considered rare. Many, for example, of the common redpolls, there were numerous sightings of them. A few fox sparrows, which I thought was pretty cool. I've yet to see one myself, but I see there was a few. So we had some great birds, including the barred owl. So there I'm just showing off one member's picture, for example. And so in the future, we want to see your pictures. So we hope to see you folks data next month. I'll hand it back to you, Val. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dean. All right, this time we do have a couple of volunteers working on various bird conservation projects here in Guelph. So if Amy is able to unmute and just give us a very brief update on her project that she's representing Nature Guelph for.
Yeah, so we've been working and getting in contact with the Bird Safe Guelph group that's on campus right now, and they're working to kind of make the campus itself more safe in terms of preventing window strikes. We've also talked with Nature Canada as well, and we've partnered up with Wild Birds Unlimited here in Guelph too, along with them to kind of help move the project along. The biggest hurdle we have right now is finding a contact within the municipality to support the group and to kind of join us in helping to help the birds. So if anybody has any thoughts about that or any contacts, that would be greatly appreciated. That's kind of the biggest hurdle we have to get past. But other than that, yeah, we've just been kind of having a lot of meetings and discussing a lot of options for projects and kind of how to move forward from here.
Thank you very much, Amy.
No
yes,
problem.
If anyone has any help for Amy with her municipal contact at the City of Guelph, please do email us at birdwing@natureguelph.ca, or feel free to email us if you'd like to help or have any other projects that you think need our attention here in Guelph. All right, the next thing on the agenda is just a quick update on the status of the Atlas in Wellington. I'm the coordinator, so I will just briefly describe what's been going on. All of the Atlas squares in Wellington have been assigned a principal atlaser. Breeding activity is picking up and the checklists are pouring in. And unfortunately, the Nature Counts app that you use on your phone to enter the data is still quite buggy with some recent upgrades yet to come. From recent upgrades and more upgrades yet to come. So if you're having trouble with the app, please don't despair. You could try uninstalling and reinstalling it. Alternatively, until it's really running smoothly, you may wish to enter your data either online or through Ebird. In the county, we're already having records of nest building by common raven. We have a new bald eagle nest started, and other birds like woodcocks are returning. So it's an exciting time of year. Lots singing out there. I'm sure you've heard the cardinals and the robins. We're also right in the middle of the standardized owl survey window, but these last two topics are exactly the things that we've got Mike Cadman here to talk about. So I would like to pass it over to him and get him started on that. Oh, I should mention before I do, in terms of the Atlas in Wellington, we have a local Facebook group. So please do feel free to keep up with us on your social media of choice. We also have Instagram. And these are meant to be discussion groups. So please do post questions or any discussion items that you'd like to start. So I'd like to introduce Mike Cadman. Mike is a songbird biologist with Environment and Climate Change Canada, and he's the coordinator of the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas, a 5-year project to document the distribution and relative abundance of Ontario's approximately 300 species of breeding birds. He has seen the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas through from its very beginning, starting with Atlas 1, which started in 1981 and ran for 5 years. 20 years later, he coordinated Atlas 2, which started in 2001, and now Atlas 3. So we're very proud to count him among Guelph's birding community, and we're very pleased to have him tonight to speak about the Atlas Owl Survey and what birds and breeding evidence to look forward to in the next few weeks. Mike, if we can pass it over to you. I stop sharing. And Mike, if you can share your screen.
Try sharing. Hope that will work. Okay, let me just. Okay, there we go. You're not seeing my screen yet, Val?
I am not, I'm afraid. I'm just checking to see. I am sure that I made it available to you, but this is a first for me as well.
Yeah.
Mike, you have co-stability, so you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah. It's a matter of getting what I want on the screen. Okay, Val, can you take back the screen for a second?
Sure.
And I think that might make a difference, because I think when it started up, the file I was looking for wasn't ready, so. Okay, so back to me. Okay, good. So can you give me the ability to share now? Okay. Well, it's not popping up.
Bottom of your screen is the green button that says share screen. Is that what you're trying?
Yeah, I tried that, and that opens up the options, but it's not giving me the option for the screen that I want to look at. Okay, no, that did it. I just had to click it a couple of times. Okay, all right, I think that'll do it.
On it, yes.
That works.
Okay, great. And play. Well, hello, everybody. Sorry for that slow start, but pleased to be here tonight. I'm going to talk to you mostly about the Ontario Eastern Screech Owl Survey, which is part of the Atlas. In some ways, it's quite a bit different than the rest of the Atlas. This is a specialized component of the project, and one that we hope will be of interest to a lot of people. What do I want to say about this? Really, just to let you know that our website that is there for the Atlas generally, and our email address is right there, should you want to contact us and follow up on any of this. So the Screech Owl Survey, then, we call it the ESO, the 4-letter code for the Eastern Screech Owl, is going to build on this map. Now, this is the map from the second Atlas in 2021 to 2025, and it shows the distribution of the screech owl in Ontario over that time period, where the different colors of red and orange that we see here are different levels of evidence of breeding in each 10 by 10 kilometer square. And you can see most of the squares south of that wiggly line, which is the edge of the Canadian Shield, have screech owls in them, except in Eastern Ontario, not quite so abundant out there. What we want to do, and so, well, I should say, we want to repeat this map, of course. We want people to go out into all of their 10 by 10 kilometer squares and look for screech owls. And we will collect breeding evidence, and we will provide that information in the form of a map like this, so we can compare the overall distribution of the species over time. But what we want to do with this specialized screech owl survey is to be able to map like this, to map the relative abundance of the bird. So beyond what breeding evidence we had, but to actually look at how many there were and how those numbers change across the distribution of the bird in the province. And interestingly, you can see the red are more abundant. You see the scale at the bottom there. And right around the southern part of the Great Lakes there, you can get 5 to 10 screech owls in 10 stops along, and I'll explain what the stops are, but obviously it's quite a common bird in a lot of those areas. Where Guelph is, we're in a thinner area, down around 1 or 2 birds per square on most squares in 10 stops. And you can see the numbers petering off again further north. But our goal of the project is to reproduce this study and do a comparison, so we can not only get a very thorough picture of the current relative abundance across the province, but also how it compared to this from 20 years ago. Okay, so how do we do that? It's through these special surveys. So if you go onto the website, click on tools and resources, one of the options it gives you is special surveys. So in our case, you click on that, and a couple of things are popping up. And one is the owls and nightjars, one is the marsh birds. For today, we're going to talk about the owl. So I click on the owl button, and it opens up this new page. You can see on the right, there's a list of resources here that you can play and listen to. And actually, there's a long list of birds there that you might get on a nocturnal survey in the Guelph area, or at least in Ontario. On the left side of the page, though, are where we get to sort of the meat of the survey, and where it says ESO instructions and forms there, if you click on that, opens up a couple of options, one of which is the instructions, and it'll take you to a manual like this. Really encourage everybody who's going to be doing the survey to go beyond my talk tonight and read the manual and make sure you really understand things thoroughly before heading out. And you can also download the data form, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But for this phase of the project, most of the project is pretty high tech now with apps and data entry. But in this case, we are recording the information on paper data forms and then entering the data into the computer later. I'll explain a little bit more about the data.
I was going to say why.
Oh. Okay, I heard somebody talking there. Was that asking a question? Why it was the paper? Anyway, if the question was why we're using paper, it's because the app hasn't yet, we haven't yet developed an app for doing the owl surveys. And there's actually not a lot of people are keen on using the app because you have a bright phone in your face at night and it does funny things to your eyes. So we might well end up using paper right throughout the project. Okay, so if you open up the manual, you get a quick guide like this, and there's a number of quick points that separate this project from the other kind of owl surveys that are underway in other parts of the province. So the key thing at the beginning here is you don't have to be an expert birder to do this project. You really have to know the screech owl call and the great horned owl call, and you can do what's essential for the project. The project runs from March 1st till April 30th every year. The window is every year. You only have to actually run the project once over the course of the 5 years, and it's done at night. It takes 2 or 3 hours, 10 stops, 7 minutes per stop, and the area, you've seen the area on the map where the surveys will take place. We do encourage everybody, though, not to just go out and do a survey, to work with Val, your regional coordinator, to make sure that we're not getting more than one person covering a square for these special surveys. We don't want multiple people doing playbacks at locations and that kind of thing. So please coordinate that through Val. And then I'll talk about this a bit more, but it's a matter of stopping at 10 designated locations around the square. Important thing is the weather. Don't go out on windy nights or very cold nights. and the equipment. You have to have reasonably good equipment for playing the call of the owl to attract them in and get them responding. We have provided some digital speakers that Val has that she can loan to people if your own system isn't up to the job. So please contact her about that. And of course, safety comes first in all of this. And so not only should you be thinking about COVID and all of the regional guidelines there before doing any of this work, but also thinking about when you're out there, you are on roadsides at night. So wear high visibility clothing and be very careful. So these are the 10 by 10 kilometer square maps. The basis of coverage for the atlas is 10 by 10 kilometer squares. And we just have new maps in the last few days for every square. There's 2,000 squares in Southern Ontario. And our goal is to get all of those covered for the atlas. And we want to get all of them in Southern Ontario covered for this screech owl survey. So the little numbered points with a plus next to them here are where the point counts occur. And I won't spend a lot of time talking about point counts, but those are special surveys that allow us to get counts of all the birds that are active during the day. What we're doing with the screech owl is building on that to give us an idea of the numbers of the birds in the square on a smaller set of those points. So the idea is that you're to choose 10 of those numbered locations, starting at, you basically start at number 1. They're numbered 1 to 40, and you see if number 1 is a suitable location. Is it safe to stop at? Is there not a lot of traffic? Is there suitable habitat nearby? And is it more than a kilometer from any other station that you're going to cover? And then also, is the habitat suitable around that location? And suitable for screech owl is basically fairly mature trees, almost always deciduous forest, but mixed forest as well. But not very often will you get them in coniferous forest. Although where the two forest types occur together, they certainly will occur there. But these, as you know, there's birds around parks, even in the middle of town, you can get screech owls, and anywhere with large shade trees, you've got a good chance of finding the birds. And the rule we say generally, if there are more than a few mature trees in an area, you can consider that location suitable for the survey. So you go back to your map and you look at point number 1 and then point number 2, and you determine, are those near woodlands that appear suitable for the birds? So I did that for these and ended up having to go up to point number 22 before I found 10 spots that were all near enough to woodland that they're suitable. And I will go out in the day and check those out and determine whether they are suitable. If they're not, then I'll go on and look at point number 23, etc., till I've got 10 points that they're going to be good, potentially good for screech owls. Okay, then you have to get ready to head out into the field, and there's a long list of things you need to take with you. Won't go into all of that here, but really the important thing is the MP3 player to be able to broadcast the song of the screech owl, and the good information on the locations of those point counts. Okay, so now you have to go back to the website and you want to download a playback. Each of the owl surveys is based on a playback, which is recordings of the birds. So back to the website, click on the playback for ESO, and just as it says, just click right there, and it will open up the file, and you can download the file to your phone and then use it in the field for the survey. So the playback itself, a different playback for each survey, but for the screech owl, it's 7 minutes long. And at each stop, you're going to play this recording. And we usually just suggest put a towel on the roof of your vehicle so that it doesn't vibrate when you play the recorder, and press the button to start the playback and then move away so you're not listening to the car cooling down. And then the playback goes for 7 minutes. It starts off with 2 minutes of silence. You get a little double beep, tells you that the playback is starting, 2 minutes of silence, and then 5 1-minute sections of screech owl calls. Each one is 30 seconds. So 30 seconds of calls and 30 seconds of silence. So the whole thing is 7 minutes long. You get a double beep at the end to tell you that you're done. And what you're doing that whole time then is listening. You can walk up and down the road. If you've got someone with you, they can walk in the other direction and listen for screech owls. And you're recording them as to which minute, if you hear them, which minute you hear them in. We do recommend, if you can, doing all 10 stops on one night. But if you can't, if the weather turns or something else happens, then certainly you can go out on another night and do it. If you're going to do that, we just recommend that you start another data form and give us the information on the date of the survey. Very important though, if you do start the survey, that if you don't find any owls, and it's quite feasible you won't find any at certain stops, it's quite feasible you won't find any on the whole survey, that you do send in that data, because that's obviously the absence of data in that case is very useful to us in learning where the birds are most abundant across the province. So the data form, as I said, you can print this right off the website. Fairly simple to fill out. Just starting at the top, you put in your square number, who you are, who was with you in the field, the date of your survey. And the rest of the information is just information to help you fill in the bottom part of the form. So if we go down to point 16 there, the second one that I filled in. So I went to point 16 and I fill in the time. Here is at 1931. I did get a screech owl, and each bird that you get while you're doing the survey gets one line of this data form. So I did get a screech owl, and it occurred in the 3rd minute of playback. So I first heard it at that time. So I put the X in that column. I then can record the breeding evidence, because singing for a screech owl is breeding evidence, a possible breeding evidence. So record an S there. And we record the direction and the distance at which the bird was first determined. So in this case, it was a bird that was to the north, and it was between 50 and 100 meters away. We also ask that you keep track of the number of vehicles that pass you, because obviously that can interfere with your hearing and with the likelihood of the birds calling. And so keep track of that. And then an overall assessment of the noise level, the level of disturbance around that site. And that's described up in the information at the top, where 1 is very little disturbance and 4 is quite a lot of noise with a lot of cars going by. If there are too many cars going by, really, we recommend just abandoning that stop and going to another point and running the survey there. So you can see, if you go down through here, point 4, I didn't get any screech owls, but I did record the traffic and the noise. And point 5, same thing, didn't get any. At point 22, though, I got a great horned owl. It was calling in the last minute of the playback. It was singing, and it was to the southwest of where I stood, and it was more than 500 meters away. So the great horned owl calls carry a long way. So no cars went by, and I had a low level of disturbance. So you can see the rest of the data form filled in here. At the very bottom, you can see that you can also record other information on other species that you might get while you're out there. In this case, a woodcock and a ruffed grouse. I got the woodcock on point 4, and it was a singing bird, and the ruffed grouse was a drumming bird, so that goes as an S also, to indicate that it fits in the possible breeding category. Okay, and then it's a matter of entering your data. So if you just go onto the website, click on data entry, it'll lead you through the process for entering your data. I'm not going to go through it now because it would take a bit of time, and we don't have too much of that. So Val, can I hand things to you now in terms of ask if there's any questions or
Yes, we can do
thoughts on
that.
that?
Let's see, I'll get, there we go. I'll get Dean to look after that. Dean, are you there? Trying to
Yes.
there we go.
So yeah, we do have a few questions. Pat Martin wants to know online data entry. How do I include all 10 stations on one form? When I tried to enter data, it was creating a new form for every station.
Yeah, that's the way it is, Pat. I think we'll be able to improve that over time, but the way the data entry happens at the moment is you enter one point at a time. Boy, but I appreciate the fact that you've been on top of that so fast. You must have got right out there. That's great. I hope you had a good survey.
Thanks, Mike. Pat also asks, can you also use Google Maps satellite view to determine suitable habitat?
Now, can you use Google Map satellite? Was that the question?
Yeah, satellite view to determine suitable habitat.
Yeah, certainly that would be helpful. The Atlas map there does give you some information on the forest type. It does give you coniferous versus deciduous woodland, but yeah, you can often get more information from a satellite view. Yeah, certainly, and actually visiting the site, as I mentioned, is a great way to ensure that the site is suitable.
Excellent, thank you. Nina asks, and this is probably best for Val to respond as the local coordinator, how many available routes are there in this county? Last year, Abide, a different survey, it appears I was told there was no available routes for screech owl survey in Southern Ontario. People love the routes and apparently rarely give them up. So Val, are there available routes here in Wellington?
Well, as I mentioned, all of our squares do have a principal atlaser assigned. Those will be the default surveyors for this type of survey unless we've made other arrangements. So yes, as Mike mentioned, please don't go out randomly and play these tapes these playbacks at the same sites that someone is potentially already surveyed. But if you really feel this is something that you'd like to do, please do send me an email at wellington@birdsontario.com. You can look up all the regional coordinators because I believe there are still squares north of here in Gray and to the east in Halton that may well need assistance this year.
Yeah, I'd really encourage that too. Particularly Gray County is, it would be great to get good information from up there, and there are very, very few birders up that way. So
there should be a lot more survey routes available than there were previously because we're doing them in every single square in Southern Ontario.
Yeah, and well, there was no Eastern Screech Owl survey outside of the Atlas. The only place the Eastern Screech Owl survey takes place is during the Atlas. So if somebody was told there are no routes available, it's because there isn't an Eastern Screech Owl survey in between the Atlas projects.
Thanks. And I have one more question from Patty, who says, if one knows where a screech owl is located, how can we contribute to the Atlas count if we're not a primary atlaser?
Oh, that's a great one. It's really like any other Atlas information. You'd be encouraged to go out, determine that the bird is indeed present, get the breeding evidence for it, and enter that, provide that to the data, to the Atlas through the website. And really the same of any bird records that you have. If you aren't a principal atlaser in the square, really encourage you to contribute data from any square that you like in Southern Ontario.
Excellent. Well, that's all the questions we have so far. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to try and line up the other part of this talk and see if I can get that. Oh, that was it. Dang. Okay, I'll just enter that one. Okay. I guess you're not seeing my screen at the moment, or are you?
I'm afraid not.
Okay, no, that's great. I can start sharing now, I hope. Yep.
Mike, could I just do one last owl question that came in while we were sorting things around? Luke
Yeah,
asks
sure.
if he knows of a location of a screech owl in someone's nest box who is not atlasing. How should that be input?
Well, I mean, as long as Luke knows it's there, and there's no doubt that it is, then um, Luke could put it in as his observation, or he could put it in the other person's name.
Thank you.
Yeah, it wouldn't be easy to put it in the other person's name. I mean, Luke would have to enter the data and then just as a comment mention it was from the other person. In order for it to be another person's name, the other person would have to register for the project.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll try this new one. Okay, so would like to give you some idea about different ways that you might participate in the project early on. Really, the flush of birds arrives back in Ontario in May, and things really start getting busy then for atlasing, as in there are very many species you can be recording. But there's lots that you can do right in March and April that's very helpful for the project and helpful in your own preparations for when the birds do come back in big numbers and we're ready to go full steam on the project. So I just listed a few different things here that you could possibly do. And one of the key things I think is this first point is to try and focus on species that are harder to find later in the season. And I'll go through a list of what some of those birds might be, but just something as obvious as white-breasted nuthatches they're very active at this time of year, March and April. They're singing all the time. They're easy to see and hear. You go out in June and they're a hard bird to find. Quite often you'll go out into your square looking for birds and not come across white-breasted nuthatches. So birds like that are hard to find later would be really good to concentrate on at this time of year. And as I said, I'll touch on what some of those others might be. Good thing to do this time of year is get to know your square very well, or if you don't have a square, go and visit some places that you think you'd like to collect data later, and try and figure out, certainly if you have a square, where some of the key features are, where the special sites are in that square. So places like marshes, different kinds of wetlands, bogs, and ponds all are obviously places where a smaller suite of bird specialized species nest. And so knowing where those are can save you a lot of time in the breeding season when things get busy. So places like riparian areas, large habitat patches often have birds that smaller habitat patches don't have. So large chunks of forest, extensive areas of grassland, large fields or areas with lots of shrubs in them, pine plantations. The larger they are, often the more rich they are in terms of specialized species. So try and find out where those are and visit them now, but be ready to go and visit them in May and June when all the birds are back. You might also want to look at where Ebird Hot Spots are in your square. Most squares will have one or two, or in some cases more. And that can be quite helpful in terms of learning things like where there's good access in your square, which is really the next point down, but figuring out where you can get to in that square. Most of the squares in this area are going to be private land. So you need to figure out how you can get off-road to get into the different habitats. And now's a good time to be sorting that out. We are producing a letter. It's going to go up on the website I hope in the next couple of weeks, that you can print off, and say you've got, there's a property that you can see that you'd love to get into. You can leave a copy of this letter in the mailbox for that property with your contact info on it. And if the landowner is interested, they can get hold of you and let you know what's involved in getting permission to go out onto their site. The other thing, of course, this time of year would be to do as much as you can to prepare. Learn bird songs if that's new to you, or give yourself a good refresher. We really highly recommend the software called Dendroica. information about it on the Atlas website. It's just a wonderful tool for helping you learn bird songs. I'd also, though, encourage very much to get out at this time of year. Now is a great time to be learning bird songs. The birds that are back are very active, singing very actively. And if you can learn all of those, if you don't know them at this point, they're going to be common birds right throughout the summer. So if you can learn those ones, it's going to make it much easier when you get to less common species that might arrive later. You'll know the common ones, so you know when you're hearing something that you're not familiar with, and you can start to track that down. And then I would encourage people to use square summary sheets, and I'll got some quick examples of what that looks like later. But it's an Atlas product that gives you information on what birds nested in your square last time, so that you can start focusing your efforts on which species are most likely to occur there. So we do have something on the website, a chart of safe dates. Oh boy. And okay, so I wanted to show you this, but it's come in a slightly different format than I had it in. And so I'll just have to explain things a little differently. And so what this is, though, this breaks down the breeding season or the year for each species and the likelihood of it occurring at different times of year. And the key thing for this, these are actually ranked by date. And so the species at the top you can basically record breeding evidence for year round. And then as we move further down, if you follow the edge of the pale blue line there, you'll see how it gradually works its way across the page. That is the period during which it's okay to record breeding evidence, but you have to be careful about it because there might be migrants around, or the birds most of them might not be breeding by that point. So in the case of, say, the bald eagle there, if you can see that it's about the 5th or 6th line down from the top. I have some arrows set up, but the way the page is set up, you can't see them. The bald eagle starts to be that you can record it as a possibly nesting bird as late as the last few days of January. And that situation occurs right through until May. And then basically any adult bald eagle that you see in breeding habitat at that time of year can be recorded with breeding evidence. So this list, having it in order here, where you can see these are the very earliest nesters, and by the time you're at the bottom of the page, your species that you shouldn't really be recording until late into March, you can see which ones would be good ones to be working on at this time of year. So unfortunately, without the arrows, it's kind of hard to see, but some of the ones I'd highlighted, all the ones at the top, of course, you can record information on, and crossbills are a high priority this year because there has been an invasion of crossbills. It seems to have petered out somewhat, but there are still some birds around and they will nest at this time of year. And so very much encourage you to go out and look for crossbills and record breeding evidence for them should you find any. Raven is one of the ones that's a very early nester. We actually had a nest reported this year in January that already had young in it in the Ottawa area, which is just unheard of. No one can understand how this is possible, but this is happening now with presumably with the changing climate and such. These birds are shifting their breeding seasons. Okay, so other species to look at, though, the woodpeckers. I mentioned the nuthatch earlier, but the woodpeckers are very active this time of year. There's a lot of drumming going on. Drumming's hard to identify the species, but if you track it down, you can often find the bird and get a good look at it and get solid breeding evidence for it at this time of year. Because in June, the woodpeckers can be quite hard to see. They've stopped any of their advertising, and they're keeping a very low profile while they raise their young. So woodpeckers, good ones to be looking for, downies and hairies in particular. Working down, though, red-tailed hawks, another bird, they do nest quite early. By March, you can start recording breeding evidence for them, assuming you have reasonable evidence that they are nesting. But when they do start to get onto nests, they nest quite early. Can be late March or early April when they will be on nests. And before the leaves are out, of course, it's a great great time to find them. So if you cruise around the back roads, scanning the woodlots and hedgerows for large stick nests, if you look at those stick nests, you often find red-tailed hawk, or perhaps in some cases great horned owl sitting on those stick nests. So really encourage that kind of activity over the next few weeks. Wanted to mention in particular too the accipiters, particularly the goshawk and the Cooper's hawk. They're both quite early nesters, and quite a number of the squares around here will have them. Probably Cooper's hawks will be in most squares. Goshawk will be in the occasional square. Both of them are primarily in coniferous forests, but they're very low profile during the breeding season, just unobtrusive as can be. But when they come back and establish their breeding territories, they're quite active displaying, and they fly aerial flights, aerial displays over their nesting sites. And so if you go out, particularly early morning is good, early mid-morning on a nice day, you often find them soaring around. They do a deep wing butterfly flight, it's called, over top of their nesting area. And in some cases, you'll get males and females doing this together, interacting, and it's much easier to find them when they're doing that than it is when they have their heads down in the forest. So really encourage you to go and look out for the accipiters at this time of year. Okay. Further down, though, there's a whole long list of birds, and I won't go into all of these, but there were a few I wanted to mention. Pine siskin in particular. It shows here you can, around the end of March, they start to establish their territories, and it's feasible to be recording breeding evidence for them. And there's just been a huge invasion of siskins. You've probably seen the birds around the area. I was riding my bike through Guelph the other day, and there were siskins in every patch of conifer trees that I passed. So I think it's quite likely they're going to settle and nest here this season. And so be watching out for that. When they're singing and hanging around clumps of trees into that period, then we can start to record breeding evidence for them. And that will be great to have, because that doesn't happen most years. What else? Anything else here I wanted to point out? No, I don't think there's anything else there in particular I wanted to mention. I mentioned going out and just finding spots in your square that would be helpful. The atlas map does have some things on it, like you can see in the bottom right of my map here. I've pointed out the oil well bog. It's an ANSI, an area of natural scientific interest. That's obviously a place that I want to be investigating for the atlas. Just below that is Niebauer's Pond. Obviously a large wetland area would be an important area to be visiting. And I've sort of gone through and I pointed out on here all special areas that I want to cover. The atlas map does show you different habitat types. So the yellowy patch down at the bottom left there, these are extensive shrubland areas, and those are really worth highlighting and going out to visit. And this one looks like it's close to a road. So I've just marked that. So I'll go out and make sure that I get to that when I'm out in my square. And I think I try to identify these places now. When you're out in the square, mark up your map and indicate places that look like they have distinctive habitat, because they're probably going to have distinctive birds in them. Now, I mentioned the square summary sheets. If you go onto the Atlas website and you look up the square resources information, one of the options you get is a square summary sheet. And I'm just showing part of it here. But if you look at the list of species and the breeding codes here, so say Canada goose there, this will sort of help you understand what this is all about. So what's listed on this sheet is all of the species that nested in Atlas 2 in this region, in the Wellington region. But what are highlighted there, so the FY and the number of FY codes there, these are the species that nested in this square last time. So we've got a good idea of what we should be expecting and what we need to be studying up on if we're hoping to find all the birds that nest in that square. And really that is our goal. we've set a sort of general goal of sending 20 hours of the peak season out atlasing, but we really do want to see if we can find all the species that nest in each one of those squares. Oh, and I mentioned the Ebird Hot Spots. If you go onto the website, again, the square resources information, it shows you the point count locations here in blue with the numbers, but the red teardrop shapes, those are Ebird hotspots. I highlighted one of them there, it highlights the trail along the Speed River. And obviously that kind of thing has already been identified by the birding community as being an important spot to go and look for birds. It has a trail system, so I'm going to want to get out into that and explore there. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Are there any questions about how to spend your time in the next couple of months?
Thanks, Mike. We do have a few questions. Nina asks, is there a manual on how to use Dendroica? It's not always apparent how to use various options.
No, there isn't a manual, but we are going to create a video on how to do that, an instructional video. We're just in the process, though, of upgrading Dendroica and giving it a whole new feature that allows you to pull out a list of birds for a habitat type. So you could put in, say, deciduous forest for Southern Ontario, and it would give you a list of the birds that occur in deciduous forest in Southern Ontario, which would obviously be really handy if you're looking for a bird that you've come across in a deciduous forest. So our goal is to have that up in the next few weeks. We're just working through the program and getting all that finished up, and then we'll make a video right away. But if there are particular things in the meantime that you need some help with, just email us at the office, Nina, and we'll try and help you with that.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Judy's also sharing that the University of Guelph Arboretum is currently running an online Zoom class on bird songs, 8 weeks, that started just last week. So if anyone needs to brush up, by all means, Google it and sign up.
Yeah, very much. Chris is a great instructor, as everybody knows, and that would be really valuable for getting everybody's skills primed for the peak season.
Excellent. A couple more questions that aren't on the public chat. Any evidence of the crossbills breeding Wellington this year?
I haven't come across any. I've made some efforts. The screech owl, the crossbills, there are a couple of spots where they hung around for a while, but nobody really found that I've seen any strong evidence. I didn't see much even mention of singing birds. I had birds that sang for about 10 seconds once, and that was about all. So my sense is at this point that the birds aren't breeding or haven't bred yet. That are around. Others may know of other evidence that I've not been aware of, but I haven't really heard of anything.
Excellent, thank you. And Susan's pointed out, though, the fundraiser, the Arboretum birding course is also a fundraiser for the Arboretum. So good cause and good information.
Yeah.
Pat wants to ask, are all the ANSI public access? If not, how do we get access?
Oh, well, Pat, you have such good questions. That one, I don't know the answer to. They're designated by the provincial government. They're not, I don't think they're uniform in that regard. I think there are some that you can publicly access, and a lot of them are private. And I would imagine it's going to be a matter of trying to find out who the owners are and see if you can get permission to get there. It's actually a good question, something that I could perhaps look into. I should mention, we are working with Ontario Nature, who have nature reserves, and they're going to inform us of their locations and give permission for people to go into those. And the Nature Conservancy of Canada is doing the same thing and making their sites available. We haven't yet looked into that question of the ANSIs, though. That would be something worth doing.
Mike, I can confirm that they are by and large privately owned. I don't believe there's any, I don't believe that MNR releases information on ownership either. So I think you're back to treating it like any other private landowner that you need to reach out to.
Right. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Val.
Mike, I have one more question. It's my own personal question as a relatively new birder. And you were talking about the various breeding behaviors of the birds and what to look for. How can we learn about that? What resource is there to learn about the breeding behaviors?
Oh, well, you probably don't have access, or if you do have access to the Birds of North America, that's the sort of gold standard of information there. The Stokes guides are very good on breeding behavior, and Val could probably tell you a lot more about those than I can, but I know I own several of them, and they are very good at giving you much more information about the breeding behavior of the birds. I wouldn't be surprised, it's not something I've looked at myself, but I bet the Cornell website too has some good information on that. And I should mention too, we're bringing out articles one at a time, one species at a time, or maybe one group at a time, to help people with that on the Atlas. We have that article up on crossbills. We've got one on chimney swifts currently being written. And so, species like that can be more challenging to get good information on, we're starting to target. And we have got word out, and we have got some information about some birders that are going to be making up videos on how to find species. We've got a fellow who's interested in he's very good at finding raptors. And so he's going to tell more about finding breeding Cooper's hawks and broadwing hawks and some of the other common ones. We're not going to be putting information out on some of the more rare ones, but some of the common ones that will, at least at this point, that we're going to start pulling information on.
Excellent.
So
Thank you very
I'd
much.
recommend keeping up with us on Facebook, and we'll try and keep you posted as best we can.
Yeah, I should say too, we are about to put onto the website a discussion board for Atlas participants, where you can go on and ask questions. And there's going to be categories, numerous categories. And so if you have a question about bird behavior, you can put it on there, and we'll find an expert who can answer it for you.
Excellent, thanks. Rob is suggesting that we make videos on bird behavior and share it for discussion. So I suspect Google could help us find many YouTube videos that might exist already.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll just do one last question here because we're approaching 8 o'clock, and we'll move along. But one last question there, Dean?
Yep, so Pat, another great question. Will you be putting out MP3s for Virginia rails and Soras?
Yeah, another great one, Pat. We are devising a standardized monitoring project for rails, well, for marsh birds that include the rails. And much like the screech owl, we will have a standard playback for that. It's based on the one that Birds Canada currently uses for the marsh monitoring program. And basically what we're doing is taking the marsh monitoring program and trying to expand that and build it into the Atlas project. So yes, there will be that information. Those resources will be available on the website soon. The protocol is almost written now. The field work for that kicks in the middle of May. And so we'll probably have it all up on the website in April sometime.
Coming up quickly. Well, thanks again, Mike. It's been wonderful to have literally the last word on where the surveys are at. And we look forward to these resources that are coming.